It's no secret that I have a lot of hot takes when it comes to movies and cartoons and animation in general, just anything of that sort. I have a lot of controversial takes regarding these sort of things, which is why I've decided, you know what would be fun? I think it would be fun if I made a video going over a few movies that everyone loves, but I don't like them all that much. Most of these movies I would probably never talk about on their own. Like, I would never make a standalone video talking about one of these movies or anything like that. A list like this is probably the only time you will see me talk about this movie. Now, something that's important to note is I don't even necessarily hate any of the movies that are on this list. I know some of y'all are gonna be disappointed in that. I know most of you were probably expecting me to be like, I think Star Wars sucks, I hate Lord of the Rings, or something like that, but no, that's not what this video is gonna be, unfortunately. These are beloved movies that I don't like, but I also don't hate them either, necessarily. Some of these movies, I will acknowledge, they're objectively great movies, they're objectively masterpieces, and yet for one reason or another, I don't like them all that much. Also, everything that I will say about the movies that are on this list, they are purely my opinion. I know there's gonna be a lot of people that will disagree with me with some of these takes, but you gotta understand, this is just the way that I look at these movies, and I cannot help it at all. I'm not trying to guilt trip people for liking these movies, I'm not trying to convince them that these are actually bad movies, I'm just simply expressing why I don't love these 5 critically acclaimed movies. Well, technically there are more than 5 movies on the list, but I'm still labeling this as a top 5 regardless. Alright, I think I've delayed the inevitable long enough. Let us dive into the list. These are the top 5 beloved movies that I dislike. Let us begin. For number 5, I'm going to start off by saying that over the past few years, if you know anything about me, you would know that I've been a very vocal critic towards Disney. You would know that I have criticized Disney a lot of times before in the past. I have criticized the way that they have been in the 2020s. I've criticized the movies that they've put out in the 2020s. However, there is one modern day movie that they've put out that has managed to be exempt from the criticisms, and that's going to change today. Number 5 is Encanto. Right off the bat, I'm going to admit, out of every modern Disney movie that they have put out post Moana, this is easily the best one. Now, I've made it clear before in the past that I think Moana from 2016 is to date the last great movie that Disney has put out. Every movie that they've put out post Moana has ranged from mediocre to straight up awful. It's very telling to me the fact that what is currently the last great Disney movie was followed up 2 years later with what is easily the worst Disney movie, and it's been all downhill ever since. However, I have seen people say that Encanto, in comparison, is a fluke. It is the best movie from Disney in a long time. The best modern Disney movie from the 2020s. And yeah, I admit it, this is the best modern Disney movie. When you compare this to Strange World and Wish, this is a much better movie. And yet I can't help but feel that, like, I don't know, this movie isn't anything special. A big problem that I and so many other people have with Disney's modern day movies is just how generic they feel. These are generic, unremarkable movies that they don't feel special at all. They don't have that Disney magic. They don't have that fresh feel that, like, the Disney Renaissance had, for example. And they're also extremely forgettable movies. Can anyone tell me what happens in Raya and the Last Dragon? Exactly. That's what I thought. Nobody remembers what happens in Raya and the Last Dragon. It is a forgettable nothing burger of a movie. Wish at least has the slight advantage of, like, you could make fun of it. You could make fun of how bad the songwriting is. You could make fun of the fact that this was supposed to be a culmination of Disney's 100-year anniversary, which was a massive disaster in of itself. You know, you can make fun of Wish in certain aspects, But overall, when you look past that, it's just a generic, forgettable movie, and that's it. Encanto, I don't want to say is a generic movie. It's not the most amazing, unique movie I've ever seen either, but I don't think generic is the right word to describe this movie. But it's also not anything to really write home about. There's nothing wrong with this movie. I don't have any problems with it. There is nothing to make me think that this movie is bad. I just don't see the modern classic that everyone else sees. This movie is decent, and that's it. This movie is not on the same level as like the Disney Renaissance or the early to mid 2010s Disney movies like Tangled and Wreck-It Ralph and whatever. It's not on that same level. I'm sorry. I just think the movie is decent more than anything else, and I don't see what the big deal is with this movie. I think the main problem that I had with this movie was just how overexposed it was in late 2021 going into 2022. I think this movie had a very limited theatrical run. It didn't do all that well theatrically because we were still largely in the pandemic era when this came out, and then the movie would be released onto Disney Plus, and just like that, it would become an overnight sensation. Everyone would be talking about this movie. I don't want to go into too much detail about it, but in late 2021, I began to enter the early stages of my now regrettable anti-Disney phase. It was that combined with how overexposed the movie was. I couldn't go anywhere without seeing people talk about We Don't Talk About Bruno. People were really trying to make this song the next Let It Go, which, dear God, no. I don't think we appreciate enough the fact that this song did not become the next Let It Go. We're not grateful enough for that, seriously. This song, and the movie as a whole, was practically inescapable in late 2021 and early 2022, and then by the summer of 2022, we all collectively decided, nah, this song wasn't cool anymore. This movie's not cool anymore. Let's move on to something else instead. And I am grateful for that. I'm sorry. In an alternate universe where this movie's overexposure lasted for a much longer period of time, I wouldn't think, this movie's decent, but I don't think it's a masterpiece like everyone else says it is. No, I would think this movie is garbage, and I hate hearing about it every single day. Now the good thing is, I very rarely heard We Don't Talk About Bruno on the radio at the time. Maybe like 3 or so times and that's it. And every time I would just either turn off the radio or I would switch to a different station because I knew, yup, this song was gonna be inescapable. Better take precautions in advance. I know this might sound like a crazy thing to take in for some of you, for whatever reason, but yes, overexposure can and will negatively affect the way that a person looks at something, even if the thing that's being overexposed is objectively good. I have seen people say, you can't hate a song just because it's overplayed. Why the not? Why can't I say a song is bad just because it's overplayed? I don't want this to come off as being like a lay wrong generation thing, but the late 2010s was an absolutely terrible time for pop music. I mean, there were good songs here and there, but there was also a lot of dog music as well, and a lot of this dog music would be played to death on the radio stations. This obviously doesn't mean much now, considering the fact that pop music is actually good again, thanks to the likes of Chappell Roan and Sabrina Carpenter and whatever. But every now and then I hear Shape of You come on the radio or while I'm at a grocery store, and just like that, the memories start kicking back in to haunt me yet again. Overexposure can and will negatively affect the way that people look at something, regardless of if the thing that's being overexposed is good objectively. And Encanto was a movie that was negatively affected to me just because of how overexposed it was, especially since I watched the movie, and I didn't think it was bad, but I didn't think there was anything really special about it either. It felt like I was missing something. Given the fact that no one really cares about this movie anymore, like I don't see anyone talk about it. We Don't Talk About Bruno is obviously not the pop culture phenomenon that it once was. I think yeah, I could rewatch this movie and maybe I'd reevaluate it a little bit. I don't think I will ever find this movie to be a masterpiece or anything particularly special. I'd probably look at it as just a perfectly fine movie and that's it. Again, this is easily the best modern Disney movie. This is easily the best post-Moana Disney movie. But that's not really saying much when the movie is still a 6 out of 10 at most. Here is hoping Zootopia 2 ends up being the movie that will end this streak of mediocrity that Disney's been putting out for the last couple of years. Or, alternatively, Zootopia 2 could end up continuing the streak. Or, alternatively, Zootopia 2 could end up being a fluke. It ends up being a really good movie, and then all of the post-Zootopia 2 movies will be a return to the mediocrity that we're stuck with. Things are looking very bleak for Disney in a lot of different aspects, including their animated movies. But with all that said, let us move on to number 4. Alright, so for number 4, people are going to be asking, bro, seriously? You're that kind of person? And I regret to inform you all that yes, I am indeed that kind of person. Number 4 is a tie between the Avatar movies. First and foremost, I'm just gonna say, yes, I'm sorry, but these movies have not left behind any sort of impact on movie history or pop culture. Avatar is the highest grossing movie of all time, and yet I've never seen anyone talk about this movie. I don't see people talk about this movie in the same way they talk about Star Wars or Back to the Future or Indiana Jones or Harry Potter or The Lord of the Rings or any of these other franchises, you know? This feels like something that should be considered on the same level as those other movies, and yet it just isn't. I don't think Avatar is a bad movie, but it is not highest grossing movie of all time levels of good. I've got to admit, the first time I watched this movie was shortly before The Way of Water came out, because I knew that was going to be a massive movie. I was too young for the first Avatar when it came out in late 2009, and I never got to saw it as a result of that. A funny story, when I was a kid, I used to be scared of movie theaters for some reason. And it was around when the first Avatar came out that I had this fear, this really stupid childhood fear. So I see that we're finally getting an Avatar sequel after seemingly forever, and that makes me curious to see what the big deal is with the first Avatar. I was well aware that, yeah, it is the highest grossing movie of all time, but then I was also aware of the discourse surrounding this movie where it's the highest grossing movie of all time, but it's left behind no cultural impact, you know, that sort of thing. I remember back in 2019, there was that whole thing of like having Avengers Endgame surpass Avatar as the highest grossing movie of all time, and I'm sorry to all the film bros and cinephiles that are watching this, but Endgame is actually a movie that's left behind an impact on pop culture. I know I'm going to get a lot of ridicule for saying this, but I genuinely believe that the Tony Stark snap scene near the end of the movie, that is the modern day equivalent to I Am Your Father from Empire Strikes Back. If you disagree with me, well, try and find a scene from a modern movie that could also fit the description of being the modern day I Am Your Father. Go ahead. I'll wait. I've got all day. I'll admit it. In retrospect, the Endgame versus Avatar stuff isn't really as satisfying as I remember it being, considering the fact that these are both Disney movies. It didn't matter who won, because at the end of the day, Disney would be the winner. But still, getting back on topic, I watched Avatar for the first time. I'm curious to see what the deal is with this movie. And much like with Encanto, I watched the movie and I think, this is fine, but like, what's so special about it? I didn't hate the movie. Hell, much like Encanto, I thought the movie was decent, but I didn't think it was highest grossing movie of all time levels of good. The movie looked absolutely gorgeous. The movie had amazing visuals, but that was really it. That was all that it had going for it. The storyline was fine. I'm not saying it's bad, the storyline, but it's just, it's nothing special. For being the highest grossing movie of all time, I would have expected this to be like, a monumental movie or something like that. Again, this feels like a movie that should be on the same league as Star Wars or Indiana Jones or Back to the Future or whatever, Harry Potter, that sort of thing. And yet it's just not on that level. It's way more successful than any of these movies, but it doesn't have that same sort of like punch to it that those movies have. And as a result of that, it doesn't have the same pop culture impact that those movies have. And I get it, a movie doesn't need to have an impact on pop culture in order to be good, and that would be fine if we weren't talking about the highest grossing movie of all time. The best-selling album of all time is an album that's actually made an impact on music history and pop culture. The best-selling video game of all time is a game that has actually made an impact on gaming history and pop culture. Why can't the same thing happen for the highest grossing movie? There's also the fact that the other two things are much stronger in comparison. However you may feel about Michael Jackson and his many controversies, Thriller is objectively an amazing album. Billie Jean and Beat It and the title track are all amazing songs, objectively. Looking past the memes surrounding the movie, Minecraft is a genuinely fantastic game. It has given people tons and tons of nostalgia, and it's no surprise that over 15 years later, the game is still being played by millions of people on a daily basis. Avatar is a movie that it exists and that's it, There's nothing wrong with it. It's a perfectly fine, perfectly serviceable movie. But not once when I watched this movie did I think, yeah, this deserves to be the highest grossing movie of all time. It's just simply not on that level. To be honest, this movie feels like the kind of movie where it's like, I watch it just for the sake of saying I watched it, Just to get that like weird non-existent validation in saying, yeah, I've watched Avatar finally. I've watched the highest grossing movie of all time. I don't watch it to love it and become like a huge fan of it or anything like that. I just watch it just to get that non-existent validation of knowing that I finally watched the highest grossing movie of all time, even if I don't necessarily think it deserves to be the highest grossing movie of all time. Let me go ahead and say that I don't think this movie should be like a box office flop or anything like that. I wish this movie bombed at the box office, nothing like that. Maybe $1 billion is like one thing. I know that was like kind of uncommon when this movie first came out. The idea of movies making $1 billion would become a much bigger thing in the 2010s. But I don't know, man. Does this really deserve to be the highest grossing movie of all time? More accurately, does this deserve to still be the highest grossing movie of all time? Like, I would understand it if this movie briefly held that title in the early 2010s and then it would lose that title to another movie. Which movie would have hypothetically garnered that title? I don't know. Any movie between Avatar and Avengers Endgame, take your pick. But damn, having this movie still be the highest grossing movie of all time it would be impressive if, number one, the movie was a masterpiece, and number two, it's left behind a massive impact on film history and pop culture, but it's not a great movie. It's not bad. It's far from bad. It's just average more than anything else. And it's not made any sort of impact on movie history or pop culture. There was an episode of Johnny Test that came out in 2011 that parodies the movie. I think that's the most cultural impact Avatar has ever had. You look at this movie and you compare it to other movies that have held the title for highest grossing movie of all time, and it's like, Jaws has made an impact on both movie history and pop culture. Star Wars: A New Hope has made an impact on both movie history and pop culture. E.T. has made an impact on both movie history and pop culture. Jurassic Park has made an impact on both movie history and pop culture. Fellow James Cameron movie, Titanic, has made an impact on both movie history and pop culture. So anyone that thinks I hate James Cameron or his movies just because I don't care for Avatar, yeah, consider yourselves debunked just like that. Film bros and cinephiles are gonna hate my guts for saying this, but I don't care. Avengers Endgame has made an impact on both film history and pop culture, and if it hasn't made an impact on either one, it will eventually. Well, I'd say it's already made an impact on pop culture. It's only a matter of time before film bros let their recency bias go away, and they accept that, yeah, this movie is on the same league as like Star Wars and Back to the Future and Harry Potter and all those other movies. Look at how many people talk about these movies, and then look at how many people talk about Avatar, and you're gonna see a massive difference. The idea that like this movie is far more successful than any of these movies, even though I've seen far more people talk about these movies when compared to Avatar. As I've mentioned before, I watched this movie for the first time just to prepare myself for Avatar: The Way of Water. Now, I've already established I don't really care for Avatar all that much. I don't think it's a terrible movie, but it's not amazing either. Here I am hoping that Avatar: The Way of Water would be a much better movie than the first Avatar. 13 years had passed between the first Avatar and this movie, and so I expect this to be a genuine masterpiece. I expect this to be a great movie. So I go into the movie theater excited to watch this movie. I'm not gonna lie, it felt a little bit awkward going into the theaters to see this movie. The auditorium was probably filled with people that were waiting for this movie for God knows how long. People who probably did watch the first Avatar when it came out in 2009. And then here I am, having just watched the first Avatar the night before. But that's beside the point. I get ready for this movie, and I'm sorry, this movie is boring. I'm sorry. The first Avatar was like a little bit boring, but it wasn't like terrible or anything like that. I didn't hate it. This movie, I don't think it's terrible either, but good God, is it boring. I genuinely could not tell you what happens in this movie. Nothing happens in this movie. Like, story-wise, this movie is just unremarkable. Visually, this movie is gorgeous. I will not deny that at all. Even the people that don't like these movies, they can acknowledge that, yeah, they're amazing visually. The movie is called The Way of Water, and so obviously it would focus a lot on water. It would have a very like aquatic feel to it, and the water looks so gorgeous to look at. Everything, I love the way that it looks, but I'm not gonna give the movie a 10 out of 10 just because I love the way that the water looks. The movie has gorgeous visuals, and then like it's just kind of average from a storyline perspective. I genuinely could not tell you what the hell happens in this movie. I could still remember a little bit of the first movie's plot. I could not tell you what this second movie is about. And then just like that, the movie would also go on to make $2 billion, becoming the fourth highest grossing movie of all time. And much like the first movie, I've very rarely seen people ever talk about this movie. Yeah, I guess I've seen like a few memes here and there for the movie, but then that's it. I don't see anyone bring this movie up in like casual film conversations or anything like that. I've seen people defend these movies and the fact that like they make a lot of money but no one really cares about them. I've seen people defend that by saying like these movies aren't about the story, they're about the visuals. People don't go for the story, they go for the visuals. And it's like, bro, every movie in existence is all about the storyline. Everything about a movie is built around its storyline. The storyline is the most important aspect of any movie ever. From a storyline perspective, they're just so average. They're fine, and that's it. They're not bad, but like, you know, highest grossing movie of all time and fourth highest grossing movie of all time, I don't know about that one, Chief. The thing is, though, I do think that these movies have the potential to be amazing. I think these movies have the potential to be genuine masterpieces. I've brought up frequently that Avatar feels like the kind of thing that should have the same reputation as Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and whatever, and like I could see that genuinely. I could see an alternate universe where these movies are held in the same regard as Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. The third Avatar movie, Fire and Ash, is expected to come out later this year in December. Am I gonna watch this movie despite the fact that I don't like the first two movies all that much? Yeah, I am. I'm sorry. Not only because FOMO is a pain in the butt, I really do not want to miss out on what will undoubtedly be the biggest movie of the year, or at least the biggest Hollywood movie of the year. My personal opinions on the movie notwithstanding. But there's also the fact that I really do want these movies to be amazing. I want these movies to have great storylines. I can only hope that this third movie, this is going to be the first great installment for this series. This is going to be the first movie in this series to have a great storyline to accompany its beautiful visuals. This is going to be the first installment that actually feels like it deserves to make $2 billion at the box office, you know? I can only hope that's the case with this movie. And if that ends up not being the case, well, at least we have Avatar 4 to look forward to. And then if that ends up not being the case, well, we have Avatar 5 to look forward to. And then if that ends up not being the case, well, we're then. We got 5 average as hell movies that all make billions and billions of dollars. I genuinely hope that Avatar Fire and Ash could be the first great installment in this series, but sadly, I doubt it. Anyways, let's move on to number 3. For number 3, I'm gonna start this off by saying I love comedies, and I wish comedies made a comeback. With how depressing the world is right now, I think we could all use a break from the millions and millions of indie movies about depression that A24 and Neon have been giving us for quite a while now, and we see a return to the fun, escapist comedies that we got in the 90s and 2000s. But even though I love comedies, there's one thing about them that I cannot deny. Yes, some comedies have aged poorly. There are comedies that used to be considered classics, but they're no longer considered classics because they have very poorly aged things in them. Take, for example, Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. Compared to the other two 1994 Jim Carrey movies, The Mask and Dumb and Dumber, Ace Ventura: Pet Detective isn't as well regarded in retrospect, and that is because some of the jokes that are in this movie haven't aged all that well. Some of the jokes that are in this movie, in retrospect, could come off as transphobic. I'm not saying any of this to be like, oh, they're just jokes, calm down you woke snowflake liberals. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not that kind of person. I'm just acknowledging that, yeah, Ace Ventura used to be considered a classic, but now it's not considered as much of a classic because it has poorly aged stuff that's in it. But here's the thing. In the same way people can separate the art from the artist, you can separate a movie from its poorly aged elements. You can still like Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, you can still find it a funny movie, and then you can also acknowledge that the transphobic stuff in it has aged poorly. Now, I'll admit, I've never seen this movie before. I've seen The Mask and I've seen Dumb and Dumber, but I've never seen this movie before. But I'm sure that there are a lot of genuinely good, funny, non-hateful jokes that are in this movie. It's not like every single joke in this movie is transphobic. If every joke in this movie was transphobic, then the movie would never be considered a classic. It would have been hated right from the get-go. On the other hand, though, and this is just as valid, you can dislike a movie because it has poorly aged stuff in it. That is perfectly understandable. Again, it's like how separating the art from the artist. Like, sometimes you're able to do it, other times you can't. As long as you acknowledge that the shitty thing is shitty, you should be fine. Whether you're able to still enjoy the piece of media looking past the shitty thing about it, that's a completely different story. If you can do it, that's great. If you can't do it, that's fine as well. You can still like a movie, even if it has poorly aged stuff in it, as long as you acknowledge that, yeah, the poorly aged stuff is a poorly aged. But then also at the same time, you can dislike a movie because it has poorly aged stuff in it. Both of these are valid. And the latter is how I feel when it comes to 1988's Beetlejuice. Yeah, That's right. I don't like Beetlejuice all that much. I'm sorry. I never watched this movie when I was a kid, which I think is for the better, honestly. The first time I ever watched this movie was in 2023 when I was staying at someone else's house. I was staying at a family member's house for the night, and they decided to put on this movie. And I decided, yeah, sure, we'll watch it. Why the not. I've never seen this movie. I've heard this movie's a classic. Sure, we'll watch it. I cannot remember what I initially thought of this movie when I first watched it, but I do remember not finishing the movie because it was like late at night when we started watching it, and I was tired and I wanted to go to sleep, so we turned off the movie and I went to bed, and that was it. I never finished the movie. That was my introduction to Beetlejuice. And so next year, 2024, there's a Beetlejuice sequel coming out. And I know this movie is just another typical legacy sequel, a movie that'll just come and go, a much too late movie that should have come out in the early 90s. Whether it'll be good or bad won't matter because it'll probably just be largely ignored and forgotten about. Most people will forget about its existence, much like with tons and tons of other legacy sequels. But even then, I was still interested in seeing this movie, and so, much like with Avatar, I went out of my way to buy the first movie, and to finish it to see what the deal was with this movie. I figured it wouldn't hurt to have a refresher for what this movie was like. Much like with Avatar, the night before I watched Beetlejuice, I would watch the first Beetlejuice. And I could very easily tell you that, I didn't enjoy the movie all that much upon rewatch. I don't remember what I thought of the movie when I partially watched it back in 2023, but I could definitely tell you what I think of the movie having finished it in 2024. Now, obviously, this movie is a comedy. This is considered a classic 80s comedy, one of the defining movies of the 80s. And yet I found myself not really laughing at the movie. I didn't think the movie was hilarious or anything like that. I just thought, it's okay, I guess, but I really expected more out of this movie. I gotta be real with y'all, the only things that I really liked about this movie were Michael Keaton's performance as the titular Beetlejuice, even with the extremely questionable things that this character does in the movie. I'll get into that in a little bit, just you wait. And I also loved the imagery in the movie. Obviously, this is a Tim Burton movie. This was like one of his first big movies. You know, it shows. It very much feels like a Tim Burton movie. And I love the imagery that this movie has. I love the way that it looks. And that's it. Those are the only things that I really liked about the movie. I didn't hate the movie or anything like that, but I just... I didn't think it was funny. I didn't find it as funny as I probably should have found it. If I watched this movie as a kid, this probably would have been like my favorite movie ever, maybe. But again, I never watched this movie as a kid, and I think it's for the better that I never watched this movie. Because what I'm about to talk about completely destroyed any chances I had of me liking this movie. It destroyed any chances of me ever going back to this movie, ever rewatching this movie a second time. I don't know how the y'all are just okay with this. I've never seen anyone say this movie is bad because of this stuff. I've never seen anyone say they don't like this movie because of this stuff. The whole thing of like, I don't think this movie is all that funny, that's fine, humor is subjective. But this right here, I don't know how anyone can defend this. I'm sorry. So the plot of Beetlejuice focuses on this couple that ends up dying. At first they don't know that they're dead, but then it becomes apparent to them that yeah, they're dead. They're ghosts that are haunting their house. And they cannot leave the house either. They're forced to stay inside of their house. And then there's this rich family that moves into the house and they plan on renovating the house. Said rich family has an adopted goth daughter played by Winona Ryder. And so the ghost couple try to get the rich family out of the house. And in order to do that, they have to consult Beetlejuice. They have to say Beetlejuice's name 3 times in order to have him help the couple scare the rich family out of their house. Okay. All of that's perfectly fine. Again, I don't think the movie is as funny as it should be, but I don't hate it or anything like that. It's near the end of the movie where everything goes completely downhill. So as I mentioned before, the rich family has a daughter, a goth girl played by Winona Ryder. Both Winona Ryder herself when this movie came out and the character that she plays are underage. Near the end of the movie, Beetlejuice finds out about this girl and he immediately falls in love with her. And so the final climactic battle, I guess you could say, the climax of the movie is you have the dead couple trying to stop Beetlejuice from marrying this little girl, and it's so fucking uncomfortable to watch, and I have to wonder, like, how the they thought this was a good idea. Like, I'm so sorry, bro, but like, ain't no way y'all can defend this, alright? There's no way. Bro, I never got to this part when I first watched this movie in 2023. It was upon rewatch that I was like, what in the am I watching? This is considered a classic? Seriously? I thought the movie was just fine when I was watching it for the first half, and then this comes and it's like, nope, I don't care. I'm not watching this again. I don't like this movie. I don't know why the hell they thought this was a good idea. I'm sure, like, there are other ways they could have conveyed that Beetlejuice isn't exactly a good character. There are other ways they could have conveyed that, and instead they chose to go with the most extreme way to convey that Beetlejuice is not a good character. I get it. This movie came out in 1988. It was a different time, blah blah blah. That's not an excuse. This movie makes it very obvious that this whole thing of Beetlejuice marrying a child is a bad thing. A movie showing a bad thing doesn't mean that it encourages said bad thing. It doesn't condone it or anything like that. I get that. That doesn't make it any less uncomfortable to sit through. I'm not gonna go and be like, oh, this is perfectly fine, you know? The movie makes it obvious that this is a bad thing. That makes it less uncomfortable to sit through. No, it doesn't. It's still really uncomfortable, even if the movie makes it obvious that it doesn't support this, it doesn't condone this. Imagine watching this movie for the first time, thinking you're about to watch a wacky, silly, late 80s horror comedy, and then out of nowhere the movie hits you with the child marriage jump scare, the scariest jump scare of them all. The weirdest thing is the fact that everyone is just seemingly fine with it. This movie is still considered a classic despite this. Whenever I see people talk about movies that haven't aged all that well, I never see anyone bring this movie up, and I don't understand why. Like, there's no way y'all are fine with this. There's no way y'all are okay with this. What the fuck? And then moving a little bit further, I finished watching the movie, and before this scene, I was like, alright, I think the movie's okay, but it's not amazing. It's not a classic like everyone says it is. And then after this, I'm like, nope, this movie is not a classic. I don't know what the hell people see in this movie. But I still went and saw Beetlejuice, despite the fact that I didn't like the first movie all that much. Now, obviously, a lot of time passed between the release of the first Beetlejuice and the release of this sequel. Winona Ryder is obviously an adult now, and so naturally they would have the movie take place many years later into the future. And so now Winona Ryder's character is an adult. And a prominent theme of this movie is Beetlejuice tries to get back with this goth girl, especially after seeing that she's now an adult. Okay, so you think, oh, this is fine then because she's an adult now. That makes it okay. No, it doesn't. I'm sorry. This is a character that tried to marry this girl when she was a child. And then many years later, he comes across her again, now as an adult, and he's still in love with her. And it's just so weird. If this whole subplot of like him being in love with this goth girl wasn't in the first movie when she was underage, if this was something they introduced into this second movie, then it's like, alright, that would be fine. But no, the added context that Beetlejuice knew this girl when she was a child. He tried to marry this girl while she was underage. It just makes this very uncomfortable to sit through. You know, this movie, again, is just kind of like whatever. It's average. You know what? It, I'm gonna admit it, this movie is slightly better than the first movie just because it doesn't have anything as uncomfortable as the child marriage scene, but I also don't like it very much just because, like, some of the poorly aged stuff from the first movie ends up leaking onto this second movie. And so I don't like the movie all that much either because of that. Funny story, when I saw this movie, there were a lot of people that were wearing different Beetlejuice clothes and whatever. They had like Beetlejuice blankets, stuff like that. They had like just clothes on with Beetlejuice on them. And you know, I'm not trying to ruin their day for them. I'm not trying to rain on their parade or anything like that. You know, I'm happy they enjoyed the movie. I'm happy they were looking forward to it, but it just feels really weird to me given the fact that this character is canonically a like, that doesn't seem weird to y'all? Y'all are just cool with it? I don't get it. You know that whole meme where it's like, there are certain characters from movies and TV shows where it's like, people look up to them even though they're not supposed to? You know the whole, like, you miss the point if you idolize them? You know, that whole thing? People watch American Psycho and they look up to Patrick Bateman even though they're not supposed to. People watch Breaking Bad and they look up to Walter White even though they're not supposed to. People watch Taxi Driver and they look up to Travis Bickle even though they're not supposed to. You know, that sort of thing. Yeah, I'm surprised the Beetlejuice isn't a part of that club. I don't know why he's not a part of this club, but he just isn't. Everyone seemingly loves this character, despite the fact that he's canonically a nunce. Like, I don't get it. The main character of one of the most beloved comedies of the 80s, if not of all time, is canonically a nunce, and we're all just fine with it for some reason. Nobody would call you a if you said that you liked Beetlejuice as a character, but if you say that you like, I don't know, Patrick Bateman for comparison, people will most likely call you a right-wing incel. I don't get what's up with that. That's just peak double standards right there. I'm not defending Patrick Bateman or anything like that. I'm not saying Patrick Bateman is a character that should be looked up to and idolized, you know. We should all aspire to be like Patrick Bateman. I'm not saying that at all. Good God, don't get me wrong. But I just find it very interesting the fact that, like, you have these two characters that have canonically done awful, inexcusable things, and yet it's considered perfectly fine to say that you like one character, but then it's considered extremely sus to say that you like another character. And I don't get what's up with that. I really don't get what's up with that at all. I understand that American Psycho is obviously not a kid's movie at all. It is an R-rated black comedy horror film. Beetlejuice, in comparison, is a much more family-friendly movie. If I had kids of my own, I would never let them watch this movie. But the general consensus is that, yeah, it's okay for kids to watch Beetlejuice. It's fine for them to watch it. I get that. Okay, American Psycho is not for kids, but Beetlejuice is okay for kids to watch. I understand that, except that just makes the problems that I have with Beetlejuice even worse when you really think about it. It would be one thing if this was some up R-rated black comedy like American Psycho, but this is a family movie. It's considered okay for kids to watch this movie. Bro had a cartoon all the way back in the early 90s, and again, it would be one thing if this was some trashy, edgy adult cartoon akin to like Beavis and Butthead or whatever, but this was a Saturday morning cartoon for kids. Children watch this show, and I just cannot wrap my head around that idea. No, seriously, what the hell is going on? Did I watch a completely different movie that the rest of y'all watched? Why am I the only one that's uncomfortable with this whole thing? Why am I the only one that doesn't like the movie very much because of this whole thing? I know there's probably gonna be someone in the comments that'll call me a woke, easily offended snowflake or whatever just because this scene rightfully makes me uncomfortable. And if you're gonna do that, then well, go the ahead. I'm not gonna try and stop you. Be my guest. But just know, by calling me a woke snowflake because this scene makes me uncomfortable, you are thereby defending this scene. And by defending this scene, well, you are indirectly telling me the kind of person that you are. if you know what I mean. Oh yeah, by the way, there's a character in this movie, the father of the rich family, and the actor that plays him is actually a nunce. Like, I'm not even joking, I'm being 100% serious. This character is played by a genuine nunce. Like, the actor that plays him is a terrible person. So, there's yet another reason why this movie hasn't aged all that well. At the same time, though, this guy also played the principal in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which, unlike Beetlejuice, is an 80s comedy that I will very easily call a classic. Although, I'm not sure how much I could be able to enjoy this movie upon rewatch, given the kind of person the principal's actor is. God damn it, man. I know, separate the art from the artist, but listen, sometimes it's easy to do it, other times it's not easy to do it. Maybe I could do it for Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but I'm not sure I could do it for Beetlejuice, given the fact that, well, this is in the movie. I'm sorry, I don't like this movie very much. I don't hate it necessarily, but it's just not as enjoyable as I would want it to be. I don't find this movie to be as funny as I expected it to be, which I'm willing to let that slide because humor is subjective, but what I will not let slide is the attempted child marriage that's at the end of the movie. I'm sorry, but that just completely destroys any chances of me ever rewatching this movie. I don't feel comfortable rewatching this movie knowing this is at the end of it. And this is a kid's movie as well, which only makes it worse. I'm sorry, I don't know what the y'all see in this movie, but I don't vibe with it at all. I don't vibe with it. I'm sorry. There's tons of classic comedies that I love, but Beetlejuice is sadly not one of them. And with all of that said, let us move on to number 2.